distinct pleasure, real pleasure to introduce Anand Kripalu, MD and CEO of Diageo India. And Anand and many of us in this group go all the way back to 1981, 40 years ago. And, after Anand left IMC in 1983, just a quick briefing on his background for those who don't know him. He joined Hindustan Unilever in 83 through Ponds, so the acquisition by Ponds. 83 to 2005, he was at HUL, then left Unilever as the MD of East Africa in 2005. Joined Cadbury's as their managing director for India, and was then the president of Asia for Cadbury's from until 2010. So he was for 5 years in Cadbury's. Cadbury's then got acquired by Kraft Foods, and Anand then became president of India and Southeast Asia for Kraft Foods. That was from 2010 to 2013. And then in 2013, he was recruited by Diageo as president, Diageo, actually USL at that time, and then became MD and CEO of Diageo India when he got renamed as Diageo India. And he's been in Diageo since 2013. Currently, as I mentioned, the MD and CEO of Diageo India, and has done a remarkable job in terms of transforming Diageo India. And so I've invited him to describe his leadership journey. And in the past year at ISB, I've been talking about leadership, the practice of leadership. And Anand, to me, exemplifies the kind of leader I've been talking about. Just an amazing leader who's worked in very difficult settings and brought about change and transformation. And one other thing I just want to mention about Anand is many of our classmates would join me in saying this. He has changed very little as a person over the years. In the last 40 years, he's retained his good humor, his cheerfulness, just his general positivity. And it's just remarkable how little he has changed internally in his core being. While externally he's achieved all this, all these wonderful corporate achievements, but as a person, he's remained the same, essentially the same. And that is truly a remarkable thing. So that's why I thought it'd be good to hear from Anand in terms of the experiences he's had as a leader. And then this session will go on till 12:30. The plan is for about 40 minutes or so, Anand will talk about his leadership experiences and his journey over the last 40 years. And then for about 20 minutes or so, I'll ask him questions and then leave aside about 30 minutes for questions from the participants. But in the meanwhile, feel free to use the chat box. Use the chat for exchanging ideas. And I'm muting all of you so that we don't have feedback. But I'll go through the chat and then ask questions as needed. In the last half an hour, I'll particularly pay attention to the chat and ask questions that are relevant. I may call upon you occasionally to unmute yourself and ask a question. So without much ado and in anticipation of a fun session, let me turn over to Anand. Go ahead, Anand.
No, well, thanks, Ramki. Thanks for that introduction. I just realized that my wife's logged in. I was wondering that she's going to really learn a lot about me that she doesn't know through this session. I just hope she's not too surprised or indeed too shocked. So listen, you've asked me, Ramki, to speak about my leadership story, and thank you for doing that. And I just want to start from the very beginning. I started life, I would say, in a very happy, but a very middle-class home. And that middle-class mentality of doing more with less, being frugal, not wasting, trying for a better deal, working really hard. I think all that has stayed with me through my career. And I just want to say that, it's really early in life when some of the seeds of your character and your values and how you think and how you operate and behave, those seeds are sown. And they actually stay with you through the course of your career and hugely influence how you behave. So as Ramki said, I worked for about 3.5 decades, pretty much all in consumer goods, right? FMCG, as we call it here. Spent broadly a third, I would say, in sales, a third in pure marketing, and about a third or the rest in general management. 22 years with Unilever, 8 in Cadbury, and now coming on to 6, actually, over 6 now, 6.5 almost at Diageo. And I've been involved with many categories, starting with talcum powder and ponds, to oral care, to detergents, to chocolates, and now alcohol. And somebody asked me, what's the strategy here? I said, well, in life, I have only progressed on the scale of indulgence, right? I'm not sure if there is something, some category that I'm going to work on after this, but time will tell. So the plan today is to talk a little bit about my experiences in jobs, and then at leading businesses, and then I'll try and extract some lessons before we open it up for Q&A. All right. So just give me a second. Yeah. So, you know, as Steve Jobs said, I don't know how many of you have been through his graduation speech at Stanford, but it's an outstanding video on YouTube if you haven't seen it. And he said it's hard to connect the dots of your career looking forward and plan your career really in a way you would absolutely like. But it's easy to do it looking back and to see what are those things in your career that shaped you and made you what you are, right? So that's what I'm going to do. So after campus, along with Ramki and many of the others who are here today, I joined Ponds in sales. For most of my 7 years in Ponds, I was working the dusty markets of India, 35 calls a day on most days in the Indian summer, working along with frontline sales guys. And that really taught me to have a lot of empathy for the people who bring home the bacon, right? Who stand out there day in and day out, irrespective of weather, and bring home the revenue. It also taught me how to lead and motivate people who are far more experienced than I was. And in most cases were old enough to be my father, right? And how do you land up suddenly out of institute and try and lead them? And I think the first seeds of leadership were sown in trying to manage those people. By then, Unilever had acquired Ponds, so I moved to marketing in HLL, in oral care, in Mumbai. And, you know, I must say this quite honestly, culturally, it was so different. In Ponds, the way you were taken care of, you were one of a small group of managers. Suddenly, you were catapulted into this ocean called Hindustan Lever, with several levels of hierarchy and bureaucracy and politics. And I struggled with that transition of culture, absolutely struggled. My wife was working in Nestle at that time in Delhi, and I'd moved to Bombay, and I used to call her up on every bad day I had and say, hang on, withdraw your resignation from Nestle, I'm coming back, right? I just can't deal with the culture of Hindustan Lever. But finally, I struggled, but I also adapted, right? And I learned to adapt. And I think that also taught me a lot about adapting to different cultures. And I prospered, right? Working there. I learned the fundamentals of marketing and brand management, and how you influence an organization that's so big across so many functions, even though you're a small brand manager in a company, right? And I also learned that you never have to be too senior actually to start influencing people. It's about how you do it. After 5 odd years in marketing, I went back to sales, and against my wishes, because I want to stay in marketing. There was this signal within HLL that if you're not good enough for marketing, they'll send you to sales. All right. So I went to sales, made a success of that job too, and learned how to influence and motivate larger teams more indirectly. Earlier, I always could interact with my direct reports, and they were the entire sales team. Now I had to influence many levels of sales to make that happen. Thereafter, I came to head market research in Unilever. And I think, you know, we used to have a textbook called Green and Tull in IIM. And I think market research was one of the subjects I hardly attended any classes of. And I was made head of market research for the combined Unilever business in India. So Brick Bond Lipton with HLL was coming together, and they said, Anand, we want you to go and become head of market research. I said, if somebody walks into my room and says, Anand, this is the consumer test we need to do, what test should we use? I'll have to say, how the hell should I know? Because I wouldn't have a clue. And it was so much outside my comfort zone that I was frightened. I remember coming home and telling my wife, Suki, I said, where's that textbook that we used to have? Can I read it now? But you know, I went into that function as the head of the department. And I said, I'll never be a strong technical market researcher, but I'll make this function so business relevant that people will say they cannot work without the right market research tools and support. And, that's what I did. I then became head of marketing for all of the detergent brands in India and transitioned from learning brand management to portfolio management of brands. And then became head of sales for HLL to lead one of the largest teams in the country. Okay. And I think I learned from many mistakes, by the way, in that stint as well. And one of them was the importance of being a strong communicator and communicating consistently as a leader when you're leading big teams. As a leader, you can only under-communicate. You cannot over-communicate, right? And that's one of the lessons I learned. So anyway, so those are the earlier functional stints that I had through my career. And then my first experience at general management was when I was asked to go as the managing director for Unilever East Africa, covering Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and a few smaller countries based in Nairobi. Now, this was a business that had not grown for a decade, right? Flat for a decade, lost money every year. And I was told by the regional president at that time, who was based in Durban, he said, Anand, this is the last attempt. Either you turn this business around or else we're going to shut it, right? So that's the brief, right? No pressure at all. So I landed in Nairobi and I was shocked to learn there are a lot of Indians in Nairobi, but I was shocked to learn that Indians were hated in East Africa because the Indians over the last century had exploited the locals. They controlled most of the industry, being enterprising as they are, right? Took over business, took over trade, and underpaid and almost ill-treated the locals. So Indians were hated. And the word going around the company when I landed was, why do we need an Indian to come here and tell us what to do? And remember, this is Unilever, right? This is not just some small local company there, right? This is Unilever. But this was the buzz going around the company. The other thing, so that was the first welcome that I kind of got. Huh? Can you imagine you go into an alien land, into a new job, and then you realize, and people actually, a couple of people actually told me who were ethnic Indians, but born in East Africa, actually told me, Anand, you have to watch out because this is what people are saying. The other thing I realized that everybody in that business was a victim. They had happily externalized everything that went wrong. The economy was bad. The Indian companies were all non-compliant and would bribe people, and as Unilever, we couldn't do that. The regional office in Unilever just didn't give us enough freedom to do what we wanted to do, and so on and so forth. And it was essentially a situation of, I am okay and you are not okay. In fact, what's interesting is none of the people who were overseeing that company during this period of no growth and loss actually felt that there was anything wrong with them at all. Everything was external. So what did I do? For the next 3 months, I traveled like a maniac across the length and breadth of the countries in East Africa. I visited people's homes. I talked everywhere. And soon I had covered more ground than many of the locals themselves. And I started earning their respect because they now knew that I had a feel of the country that was a personal feel, not a secondhand feel based on somebody just making a presentation to me. And therefore, I could start contributing on what we should do in the business. So we put together a very simple ambition and a strategy for the business, things like focusing on a few key brands, driving low unit price packs, right? Going after comprehensive cost cut. In fact, I picked up a lot of the lessons I had learned working in the Indian business. And irrespective of how large any Indian business is, because of the middle class mentality of Indian businesses, they tend to be frugal. Whereas Africa has been advised for too long by Europeans and have been advised to buy machines from Italy to make laundry soap and Lifebuoy soap that's going to be used by people earning $2 a day versus getting it from China or India. So I was able to translate a lot of those learnings into that business. And we unveiled that plan to the larger company, created a scorecard to ensure that we measured progress and so on, which are standard things that you do. And the business started turning around, just a few simple things, right? And by the end of the year, the business was delivering double-digit growth and turned profitable. And the greatest satisfaction for me is that, first of all, I know for a fact that the business sustained double-digit growth for a decade thereafter. And an Indian who recently went to Unilever East Africa sent me a LinkedIn invite recently, is with Unilever there. And he said, Anand, you left East Africa in November 2005, and they still talk about you here, right? No greater sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. And that was really my legacy, that people had started believing in themselves. And therefore, they were delivering now. And my lasting memory was that many of those people who had rejected me when I first landed wept during my farewell. And remember, I was there for only 15 months, right? By which time I got this Cadbury job. India was booming as an economy in 2005. The markets were opening up, and it was too good an offer to refuse. So I moved from East Africa with my wife and sons, bag and baggage, 40-foot container again in 15 months back to Mumbai. And I joined as the managing director for Cadbury of the Indian subcontinent. So the company was just coming out, and bad things nobody forgets. How many people still remember the infestation or the worm crisis of Cadbury? I bet you most people will. It happened in 2003, 2004. Bad news is never forgotten, right? Good news gets forgotten in a jiffy. So the business was just coming out of the infestation crisis when I landed up in November 2005. And I must say the team, my predecessor and his team did a great job of addressing the crisis at that time by making tangible changes in packaging and also getting the good old, always reliable Amitabh Bachchan on board, right, to be the brand ambassador for Cadbury. And by the time I joined, the business after the crisis was back to delivering double-digit growth, right? And therefore, I came in with the double-digit growth there. In fact, the historic growth of Cadbury, apart from those periods of inflection when the performance was bad, had historically been double-digit. And you know what? When I landed there, I came with folding up my sleeves, raring to go to say, Indian economy is opening up. The Cadbury brand in the mind of people is much bigger than the revenue on the ground, and the revenue was 800 crores at that time. I said, this business must grow faster. And what I discovered was that everyone believed that double-digit growth was great. That Cadbury was a mature brand in a mature category. After all, it had been around in India for 60 years at that time, right? So how can a mature brand in a mature category grow faster than double-digit? And that's when I learned the saying that you never have mature brands, you only have mature brand managers. Okay. So I joined, and I really wanted Cadbury to be part of the party that I felt was out there in the Indian economy. And I felt there was a party going on, and we were not invited to that party. That's how it felt. So what did we do? With a few people who did believe we could do better in the business, right? Most of my leadership team said, impossible. It's never grown faster than double digit. Why will it grow faster? And I put together an ambition, my neck on the line. And this was in April 2006, 5 months after I joined, right? I unveiled my strategy to say, we will grow this business by 20% each year, 20% till 2010 is the mantra. Most of the company felt, I'm stupid. I don't understand the business. I don't understand the category. This guy's come from outside. He has no bloody clue. And he's just got a pipe dream. Okay. So with a few people, we tried to build a clear strategy of how that ambition would be delivered. And it was a strategy of focus. In my first year, I killed 1/3 of the brands in the Cadbury portfolio, killed. I halved the number of SKUs in the company. I halved the number of innovation projects we were working on. And you know what? Growth started improving. And the naysayers in the business slowly but surely started coming on board, because everyone wants to be part of a flying ship. Nobody wants to be part of a sinking ship, right? Everyone wants to join the bandwagon of something that's looking to be successful. We focused on just 1 or 2 innovations per year that could make a big impact. And those were the years when Cadbury Dairy Milk Silk and Oreo biscuits were launched in India. Both are massive successes for the Cadbury business. And you know, it confirms the philosophy that less is more, and more is actually less. Over 8 years as MD of Cadbury, we grew the top line by 25% and the bottom by 25% CAGR over 8 years. And you know, if I had to do this again, I would have only made one change. I would have aimed for 30%, because we ran out of capacity, both physical manufacturing capacity and organizational capacity. But then who the hell was to know? Now, during the last few years of Cadbury, yes, I did go and oversee Cadbury Asia, including mainland China, Southeast Asia, and then we went through the Kraft acquisition and the split to Mondelez and everything else. And I just felt that I could see the before and after of the cultural change that was happening in the company. And it was almost too hard for me to take personally, all right? So I felt that was the time to go and look for newer pastures. So Diageo approached me, as Ramki said, and Diageo, as many of you know, is the world's largest premium spirits company with brands like Johnnie Walker, malts like Talisker and Lagavulin, gins like Tanqueray and Gordon's, vodka like Ciroc, Kettle, Smirnoff, rum like Captain Morgan, Bailey's Irish Cream, Guinness beer, and so on and so forth. So a lot of great brands. And Diageo was also recently awarded Britain's most admired company, ahead of many of the biggest corporate icons who operate in India that you would think of as British companies. All right, so Diageo is absolutely a great company. So in July 2013, Diageo took control of United Spirits, and a lot of this is in the public domain, folks, about the acquisition from Dr. Malia. It was a listed company with a turnover of about 10,000 crores. And remember, in our industry, if you pay 100 rupees to buy our brands, I get less than 20 in my hand. So when I say my revenue is 10,000 crores, consumers are paying 50,000 crores to buy our brands. And we were paying, and we still pay, about 30,000 crores of taxes a year to the exchequer. Okay. So that's the nature of company it was. So I was approached to do the integration between the 100% owned subsidiary Diageo India and USL, and integrate into one company. And said, we want to do this job. And I must tell you, if I'm honest, I got cold feet to start with. Did I want to join the alcohol industry in India? Because everyone has their own opinion of the alcohol industry in India, and most of those opinions are not positive. It's a category where people enjoy the category in the evening, but the same guys do not want to be associated with it in the day, right? It's the nature of the category in India, okay? But on the positive side, there was Diageo, great company, a category that had very low rates of per capita consumption compared to any other country in the world, and therefore was ripe for growth. Attitudes and barriers to alcohol were breaking down. Women were beginning to drink and drink more openly. It was not taboo to drink. You could serve alcohol at weddings. In fact, you can't have a wedding nowadays without serving alcohol, I feel, but anyway. But all those traditional barriers were beginning to break down, right? I mean, 30 years ago when I got married in Bombay, my IM batchmates were drinking up in the room because there was no alcohol being served at the wedding downstairs, right? Now when my son got married earlier, the bar never shut. So, you know, it's just a sign of the times and how the transition has happened. So really, it felt like it was a very exciting part of the larger consumer goods space in India. So after 30 years working in what I would call within quotes, industries that were within quotes clean, no reputational problems, right? I took the plunge and took on the challenge. And I said, to be honest, I took it on because I felt that this was probably the third and probably the last big job I'll do in my career. And therefore, what did I have to lose, right? I still wonder whether I've done it earlier in my career, right? So I said, what have I got to lose by taking on this job? And if I'm honest, the challenge that I inherited was far bigger than any challenge I anticipated. Put our might behind a few of the 150 brands that the company still owns, right? And there are many brands that many of us in college have grown up on, Bagpiper and Director Special and Old Tavern and Haywards, and they're all our brands, okay? Right? As part of your McDowell's and Royal Challenge, and all these brands are our brands. Okay, so we chose a few of those brands to focus on. We changed the way the sales organization worked from a push-driven system to a pull-driven system, and told people that in a media dark market, your retail store is your television screen. Your brands have to show up like they would on a television ad, you know, when somebody goes to shop and buy. We transformed the cost base of our business. When I started, we had 94 factories. We have less than 50 today, 47 to be precise, so exactly half. So we shut half the factories. We invested in the ethical marketing of alcohol. I killed brands which were millions of cases. We used to have a brand called Dietmate. And one of the decisions I took here, I said, I will not market an alcohol brand called Dietmate, irrespective of what the technical support is for that claim, because it is just the wrong thing to do, to make people think that it's diet and you'll actually maybe lose weight if you drink that, right? It's just wrong. So we killed a brand of a couple of million cases. So ethical marketing of alcohol, and then invested in things like road safety, don't drink and diet campaigns, and in corporate citizenship, focusing on sustainability and doing other things that we believe any corporate citizen must do to stand up and be counted, so that you work in synergy with the communities within which you operate. The organization has also been transformed in terms of structure, ways of working, and culture. We've halved the number of white-collar employees, enhanced the focus on inclusion and diversity. When I walked into the boardroom on the 1st of October 2013, there were 25 people around the table as the management committee of the company. Not one woman. It was a man's industry. Women never came close to the industry. The few women were the secretaries in the organization, sadly. Today, 4 of the 8 in my leadership team are women. 1/3 of my top 50 people are women in the company. All right? It is not a man's industry. It was just portrayed that way, that old men with bald heads and pot bellies are the people who run this industry. And, you know, you get what you deserve finally in terms of image of the industry, right? You get what you deserve. And we've tried to make those changes happen. And today, it's easier for me to attract top talent. In the beginning, it was really hard. You can imagine how hard it was to drag people into the company. And a few people were willing to join because they had heard of me and said, okay, if you're there, I'm willing to come. But most people did not, right? And women certainly not. I think that's changed dramatically, right, in terms of the face of this company. And we're getting people now from some of the top consumer goods companies. And lastly, most importantly, I think we've changed the way business is done in this industry. Doing business the right way. People told me it cannot be done. You cannot clean up this industry, right? And we're still living to tell the tale, okay, several years later. And fortunately, all this happened while the business was growing and delivering improved profitability, all right? So my experiences at business leadership really covered 3 kinds of situations, right? One, a turnaround situation like East Africa. One, a company doing well, which you need to accelerate performance, which was the Cadbury story. And one, which was really an all-round transformation, which needed a transformation in terms of every aspect of an organization, which was really what happened with Diageo, right? So to just sum this up before we open it up for questions, I'm just going to capture 5 lessons. There are many lessons, obviously, over a 35-year career, but I'll just give you 5, right, that I have learned. 1, setting the right ambition. One of the biggest responsibilities of a leader is to set the right ambition for their business. Because, you know, ambition determines effort, resource, what you will do, the organization structure, and so on. And this is one of the most important decisions a leader must make. And, you know, if you aim to grow your business at 10%, then you will plan your organization and resources based on that 10%, right? But if you plan to grow your business at 25%, then you will plan it quite differently. But why is it so tough? Because ambition setting is the marriage of a science and a dream. It is not a simple extrapolation of the past, right? It is part of the past, otherwise you'll be silly to only have both feet up in the air. But it is an extrapolation of the past, but married with your ambition and your view of the future, right? And if you set your ambition too high, you will set yourself for failure. If you set it too low, like I did in the Cadbury example, you will leave money on the table, all right? And that's why it's so important. The second lesson, which I don't think was ever taught in management school, I don't know if it is now, Ramki, is the power of focus.
Yes.
Right? And you know, the most important, see, we talk of power of focus, less is more, etc. But when we think of this, we think of resources like money, etc., etc. The most important resource in a company is management time. What you get people to focus on, and more importantly, what you get them to not focus on, right, actually determines what gets done. All right? And it's very easy to keep throwing things at management, right? And then they will not be doing the things that they should be doing. Okay. And, you know, it's hard for Indians because I think Indians tend to multitask, love multitasking. We're the only race to 5 people talking in a room and everyone can follow every conversation with everybody else, right? So we just aren't focused in terms of our DNA, right? But you know that to be an international level sports person, you have very few cases of sports persons who are masters at multiple sports. Because mastery takes time and focus, right? Otherwise, you'll be jack of all trades. And this is one of the really important lessons that I learned. Less is more, and more is less, right? Keeping busy doesn't necessarily drive the wheels of the business, right? In fact, a lot of things that does keep us busy makes no bloody difference to the business. And that's the hard reality of it. The third lesson is that we make growth happen. And this is particularly true in tough times like now, right? Where the markets are shutting down in front of our eyes and all around us. You know, when I joined Cadbury, I asked them to do a simple correlation of GDP growth and Cadbury's growth. And the correlation coefficient was minus 0.9. Because the years of great performance were years of poor GDP. But the years of great performance was because the company innovated well, had great ads, you know, drove distribution, innovation, did all great things. So the company grew, right? Now, if you're in a category that's relatively small, where per capita consumption is small, you can source business from mithais and other sweets that go down your throat, right? Then, you know, the GDP growth number is relatively incidental, right? And so the belief that we make growth happen. In fact, some of the world's greatest companies were born during slowdowns and recessions. Huh? If you go down to the Great Depression and the, you know, of the Americas and of the world, GE, IBM, General Motors, Disney, Microsoft have all been born during really tough times. Okay. So I find very often that, and I used to do it, by the way, when we make presentation to our bosses, we all externalize when the performance is bad and we internalize when the performance is good. When the performance is bad, we say, you know, it rained too much and this happened and that happened. And when the performance is good, you say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. You never give credit to the economy. And I think the thing is, you've got to be honest with yourself. And you cannot be a victim. You have to, you are where you are because of you. And you have to do what's in your circle of influence, not in your circle of concern. You have to do what's in your circle of influence. You can be concerned about the economy, but bloody well, there are other people dealing with that. You can't do much. You can only do what's in your circle of influence. So never be a victim. The fourth lesson is to be future ready. In a fast changing environment, high growth environment, I'm reminded of the saying that God has given you two eyes, one to look at today and one to look at tomorrow. Okay. So the reality is consumers are changing faster than marketeers and business people. Huh? And that's why you have people coming and disrupting old business models, because you know what? The old business guys forgot the pulse of the consumer, right? And that's why you have these new guys appearing who create unicorns, because the old guys who are responsible for understanding the consumer and giving solutions that serve consumer needs better didn't do their job well. So somebody else came and disrupted you. It isn't just technology. It is understanding what the consumer wants. And I'm speaking more from a consumer goods perspective, right? So also when organizations and the marketplace is changing fast, what happens? In your own business, people you have who do 3 years in a job, they themselves will have to adapt their skills and capabilities in the same job. There's no time to go away, get reskilled and come back and do your next job. You have to adapt, and therefore training programs need to be now, bite-sized, continuous, right? This is not about once in a while going away and doing a full program and coming back. You have to adapt, learn, and improve your skills and capabilities during the jobs that you're doing, okay? And the reality in this is, and we are seeing this from so many examples, if you don't stay ahead in today's world, there's only one answer: you will perish, right? You will be the dinosaur of your industry, and that's it. And finally, winning the right way. And I just cannot overemphasize how important this is, right? And it's born out of, I think, the way you're brought up, the values that you've had and the values you've imbibed. But I also believe that businesses are run by conscience, right? And I run a lot of what I do through my own conscience, right? What I believe in is right. And I have a very loud inner voice. I cannot do something wrong. I just cannot sleep with it if I do. And that forces a certain path. So I'm happy to fight anybody in a fair fight, okay? As long as we all play by the same rules, yeah? And often people will tell you, there's a huge cost to compliance and doing things the right way, and it's much cheaper and faster to get it done the wrong way. But you must also think of the cost of non-compliance. Enron, BP, Volkswagen, Satyam, institutions that are not built on conscience and values are built on a deck of cards. They can collapse anytime, right? Businesses have to become institutions, right? And institutions are not founded on weak values and on a weak foundation, okay? So I don't think you have increasingly any choice in today's world other than being a good corporate citizen and playing by the book. You will always get away in the short run, but I will bet you that at some point you get found out. Okay. So those are the 5 lessons that I wanted to just share with you and a bit of my story, Ramki. So that's where I am. So I'm going to just hand it back to you and to any questions that you want me to take.
Thank you, Anand. That is just fascinating. Wonderful, just very inspiring. As I think of those 5 lessons, I'm reminded of how much they reflect what I call being for leadership. Bringing your whole self, being really engaged. I think you exemplify both in personality and this thing about focus. Better to do a few things really well with all your being as opposed to doing 10 things with half your being. So bring all your energy to a few things and doing them well, doing them right. I think these are real principles of what I call being for leadership, beingfulness. And so I just want to, there's some very distinguished people in this audience. I'm going to call upon Rao Unnava, who's the Dean of the Business School at UC Davis, to give his thoughts, maybe a minute or so, Rao, in terms of your thoughts on what Anand was saying. And I'm going to locate you and then unmute you. If I can get you to comment on your reflections on what Anand just mentioned. Go ahead, Rao.
Thanks, Ram, and Anand, thank you very much. That was really fascinating to hear your story. I still remember you as the gentleman who has left IIM Calcutta in 1983, and then I knew about all the great things that you've done, but hearing the story from you was just a treat for all of us. So thank you for doing that. When Anand was talking about a lot of things, I thought that there were several things that were unsaid by him. And it's probably because of his humility that he didn't say those things, because I see that what he has done is essentially inspire people by being who he is. This kind of success is not achieved by one person. It is achieved by people who are following him. And he couldn't have achieved that unless he had inspired them to achieve great heights. So how he did that is going to be an interesting topic for all of us to discuss, because we know him, we followed him, we enjoyed him. So he probably had carried that same positive energy that you were talking about, Ram, in introducing him wherever he went. And there is enough research to show that people like positivity anywhere they go. And that's one of the important things that I thought was not mentioned by him, again, because of his humility, but that energy that he brings wherever he goes, and the inspiration that he produces from that is what leads to these kinds of successes that he was talking about. And there was this other thing that really caught my attention, because very few people have this place given to the inner voice that he was talking about in their decision making. And again, organizations collapse when that inner voice is not leading the executive. I was reminded of Bob Cialdini, who's a very famous psychologist who had done a study recently. And he had an interesting situation where there were two groups led by a confederate, as they call him. That's his own RA who was leading the group, one group A and group B. In group A, they were given a task and they were supposed to finish it just like a regular task. In group B, the leader whom he appointed was actually cheating. And he made him cheat because it was his own person who was doing it. And the two groups competed, and they actually ended up winning a big prize for winning. But the group B that cheated was the one that won the prize. After the whole thing was done, he asked the two groups if they would be willing to go back to the same team and work again. And the winning team, nobody wanted to work in the team again. Even though they had won a tremendous amount of money, nobody wanted to work in the team. So the tone set by the leader will have a tremendous impact on the willingness of people to give more than what they would otherwise give in an organization. And I think that also has been achieved by the leadership that Anand has shown. So those were the observations based on what I was listening to him. Really grateful to have this opportunity to hear his story from him. And I look forward to the questions from your audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Rao. I think that the question of moral imperative is an excellent one. I'm also going to turn to Sudhir Kulkarni, who's in California. Sudhir, your thoughts, and maybe a quick line about your background, what you're doing now, and your thoughts on what I just described.
Okay, so let's get my story out very quickly, 30 seconds maybe. I've been in the tech industry for almost 20, 25 years now, and built three startups, two of them here in the Bay Area. Took one company from a 40 million to a $500 million, and now work as a president of another technology company, trying to see how we can succeed there. What I love about, I keep thinking Poncho, because that's what we call him. That's what he's been called all along. Is that, think of every business as an institution. I don't care whether you're running a division or a group or a full company like Poncho has done 3 times over. But think of it as an institution. That's a very, very big statement to make. And, that only means that you're living the values through that institution. And you're actually then having the institution reflect those values and stand for those values. And if you look at any good company and great company, you'll always think about the kind of things that they stand for. Think Apple, right? Is a classic example of standing for something that is, design excellence. And that's what you stand for. So you're thinking and living those values, and it starts with the leadership, as Poncho was explaining. But it also, he seems to have sort of talked about it, saying not just doing things right, but also doing the right things. I think that kind of, he emphasized it over and over, whether it's the diversity issue that he talked about, or talked about mentoring people, or the high energy and positivity that Unnawa highlighted as well. I think those are very important. And I want to leave this one comment, Ramki, on this session, that, being in the tech industry, one statement that Poncho made was, digital transformation is not about technology, or transformation is not about technology. It's about understanding how the consumer buys from you. So if you understand that, all technology kind of falls in place, right? It's the last thing that you want to think about. You want to think about how the customer is buying. And if you figure that out, any transformation is a piece of cake. So those were my comments. Great session, Poncho. Good hearing you. And, after a long time, having you hold the forum.
Thank you, Sudhir.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks, Kulp. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And this point, Sudhir, you're making that Anand made, reinforced earlier, is all about having a higher purpose, a purpose that goes beyond oneself. And I want to actually now call upon Rajiv Sabrawal, who's a professor of information systems at the University of Arkansas. Rajiv, I think you hold the Sam Walton Chair in Information Systems. Your thoughts on what just transpired?
Thanks, Ramki. Thanks, Anand, for that fascinating talk. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Enjoyed your comment on Steve Jobs, whose career I followed as a doctoral student when I first came to US from India. And a lot of what you said related to things that some of the great leaders have said and done. Certainly Steve Jobs, but also Sam Walton. So where I'm currently located is in Northwest Arkansas, which is where Walmart is headquartered. And while I found all your 5 lessons very, very insightful, I appreciated the first 2 about ambition and focus the most. And maybe that was intentional on your part. Maybe they were in your perceived order of importance. But also, I really liked how you mentioned on several occasions how you relate to people. Whether it be early on in your career when you were starting off and you were placed in charge of people who were several of whom were old enough to be, as you said, your father's age, and how you related to them, as well as later on in East Africa, people who were concerned about why someone of Indian origin was being placed in charge of them. So I was really impressed, although as always, you're being very modest in some of the things that you're saying. Well, you're being very modest in all the things you were saying, but I really enjoyed hearing your leadership style in terms of how you relate to people. And again, we've all read about Steve Jobs when he was first in charge of Apple. That's where he's always a great innovator, great designer, etc. But during his during his first stint, until John Sculley got him kicked out of Apple, his own company, at that point he was not relating as well to people. But later on, when he came back, somewhat older, somewhat more mature, he did a fascinating job. But also Sam Walton, and how he used to go to all the different locations of Walmart and talk to people who are who are directly interacting with the customers and really learning from them. And in a lot of things that you've said, Anand, today, you've been doing that. So again, congratulations on an absolutely fantastic career. We all of us from IM especially follow you very closely, and again, great listening to you. And again, thanks so Ram for giving us this opportunity to listen in.
Hey, thank you, Rajiv. It's a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
Everyone else on the phone. Anand, a few questions to you in terms of one that repeatedly gets asked when I'm teaching on leadership, and that's on the mind of many people, is how do you deal, operating from this place of principle, how do you deal with difficult bosses? People who perhaps don't see the world your way, may not have the morals you have a vested agenda, play politics, and perhaps even co-workers. How do you deal with those kinds of settings where your boss is very political, doesn't has something, maybe an axe to grind? How do you deal with such people?
Well, so, they say in your life, you cannot choose your boss and your father, right? And so you will get the boss that you get. Now, I've had a variety of bosses, right? And including some very, very tough bosses, right? And actually, the toughest bosses that I had, actually, I have built the best relationships through life later.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, I believe that, if first of all, as long as you're working in a decent company, you've got to believe that your boss is there because the boss may have other problems, but also has some competence. Because it's unlikely, or you're really in the wrong place, if you have completely incompetent and difficult people who are sitting on top of you. Right now, I haven't had to deal with that kind of a situation in my career. Right? I've dealt with tough bosses who are competent, right? Demanding, and very, very hard. And I approach this as following. So first of all, I don't even understand the word organizational politics. I'm probably too naive. I have pursued my career. In the first 10 years or so, I was very hungry about what's going to happen next. Okay. And when you stop worrying about that, you actually start fulfilling your potential and start performing far better. Right? Otherwise, you're always looking at the next job rather than absolutely fulfilling yourself and looking and getting the best out of the current job. Right? And I'll come back to this about tough bosses, but on this point, I want to just give a little story. In 2008, 3 years after I was in Cadbury, the global chairman of Cadbury, anyway, the name will come back. He was the global chairman. He was knighted as Sir. He visited India. Right. And he came and sat in my office in Bombay. And he said, so Anand, you've been here 3 years. What do you want to do next? Now, normally you would think a situation like that and say, wow, this is the time to just ask for the moon. I think I paused for 30 seconds and I said, nothing. I just want to continue doing what I'm doing and leave a legacy in this job. 2 months later, they promoted me, made me president of Asia for Cadbury. Okay. So going back, I'm saying that I think, as long as, tough bosses who are competent, they all want people who are competent and deliver what's needed working for them. And I think people find their bosses much tougher when they are not giving their jobs the 100%. Right? I find it hard to believe somebody who's delivering, performing, doing their job, boss may still be tough and demanding, but not being able to build an equation with that boss, or that boss not wanting to watch over and help and support this subordinate. Yeah. Right? I find that really hard. It goes against human nature because that boss is also evaluated on delivery and performance. Right? And we all want to surround ourselves with people who can help us deliver what we have to deliver. So I would say that, the simple mantra is, yes, people have personalities and you have to deal with those personalities and insulate yourself, but let it never derail you from doing the best that you can for your job. I think that sorts itself out. And I can tell you with the two of the bosses that were very, very difficult. One was the first one I inherited as a boss when I moved from ponds to levers. He was the toughest guy. Every sentence was 4-letter words. And you had arrived from ponds where everyone said good morning and good afternoon. And suddenly this guy was abusing the hell out of you. You give him a proposal, he'd tear it in front of your eyes and throw it out of the window. He actually did those things. My first proposal to give us soap free on toothpaste, he made me handwrite the days before the PCs 6 times before he approved it. And I said, what a misery this guy is. But I learned how to write a proposal.
Because of him.
The best that I could have ever done. So you have to, I think, recognize that no one's perfect. Focus on the good. Right? And focus on what you can do in your circle of influence again. Right? You can't change your boss. but you can do the best you can do to impress him.
Yeah.
Right? And I would be very surprised to feel that he'll still be nasty with you, and unless he's such an unfair guy. Right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
normally those guys get weeded out in good organizations. Right?
Well, so that's my question. That's the other question. So quite often I'm asked by students, many of whom have many years of experience in companies. And the question they ask is, what's the point in all these leadership principles, being full leadership, or whatever you call it, when all around you, we see people being promoted, we see leaders in high places who are the exact opposite. They're crooked, they're unscrupulous, they're immoral, they take advantage of people, they're self-centered. You see a lot of real, a-holes in business as leaders. So why follow all this? Why be good when everyone else is being bad and getting promoted for it? How do you respond to that?
I think first you have to go back into your conscience. If you're happy doing what they're doing, then do it. Yeah. Right? Or else pick up your bags and go somewhere else, which is a better place to work. Don't live in misery. Life's too short. Why would you continue to work in an institution where you believe that everyone else was getting unfair advantage and being corrupt and getting promoted for the wrong reasons? Right? Either you follow them and then be happy with it and live with it through your career, or say, my God, I need to move to a better place. Right? But don't let this become this concept that I spoke about in my opening talk of becoming a victim. Where you externalize everything and say the other guys are benefiting because they're corrupt and I'm losing out because I'm honest. I mean, make sure you're not in a victim mindset here, right? You have to get on top of it and you have to fix it because nobody else is going to fix it. And I would only say that, this goes back to the concept of saying that, you internalize all the good things and externalize all the bad things sometimes, right? Now, I'm not saying no organization is perfect. Organizations I have experienced are also not so rotten, right? Where this has been a liability. And I'm telling you, I have not played organizational politics. And I'll tell you one thing. So one of the lessons for me through my career has been when I have seen bosses who I've not liked or not enjoyed working with, or peers who have not enjoyed, I have tried to make a mental note of that to say, when I become more senior, I must not be like those people. Okay. More often what happens is when you become more senior, you are exactly the same. And then there are people below you who are saying, oh God, look at this guy, right? So the thing is, are you going to get better, right? I tire people with the extent I go to be fair and to be seen to be fair in an organization, to be meritocratic, okay? And people sometimes say, even about giving an exceptional increment to somebody else, say, no, not going to do it. What's the principle behind it? If there's another person similar, then that person must get it too. And I go to extents where I drive my HR people nuts. But I really believe in fairness because at the end of the day, leadership is about followership. Yeah. People will follow you if you're fair, if they trust you, if you're a real human being, if you're vulnerable, if you also make mistakes and accept it rather than be Superman, right? That's when people actually follow you and support you and give their hearts for you, right? And I think that, so that's what I would say. And I don't think there's any model of staying in your career in a job in a place which you hate.
Leave it.
I mean, why? Why would you do that?
Right.
Why? And be miserable.
Yeah. You have one life to live. Yeah.
So one life to live. And,
One last question before, I know there are a number of questions that the participants have asked, so I'll turn to them. I'll turn to you, Sanjay, Poonam, and others after this last question. And then we'll have at least about 25 minutes of Q&A with the audience. So the last question is, given the crisis that's going on now, the COVID crisis, what do you think would be the new leadership normal after this crisis? What's your sense of how leadership will change? Or will it change at all? What's your sense of the new normal when it comes to leadership?
I think some aspects of it could change. But I think the fundamentals will not change. So, so for me, there are two priorities. Let's say in my current role, for me, two priorities through this COVID thing. One is manage the crisis, and the second is emerge stronger. Simple. Okay. Managing the crisis was first about managing people. And you know what? We just did a pulse survey of how I think 2,600 people have responded to the survey, have felt about how we've dealt with the crisis. I've got the highest scores, the crisis management team who ran this have got the highest scores that we've ever seen, including Diageo is a great place to work, 96%. I will recommend Diageo is a place to work, 94%. Right? Because we put people first. We started work from home even before it was mandated. And we have kept engaged. I have done all employee calls every week, given them updates on what's happening, etc., etc. So managing the crisis in terms of staying connected, taking care of people, protecting them, and also making sure that policies are consistently rolled out to deal with the emerging situation. All right, so people are clear what is expected of them, what is not expected. And then we spent these 2 months doing scenario planning. What will we do when it opens up again? All right, and focusing on that. What I've realized is the culture of your organization is more important than anything else at a time like this. It actually gives you strength. It gives you support. People say, people are not only with you with their minds, they're with you with their hearts, right? And they're with you to support you in the crisis and to say, we will show these guys when the crisis comes, when we come out of this crisis, okay? And I've seen that through this process. So now that the market's opening up, I think the biggest things is going to be that, and as we've been saying now, you know, the numbers will be what the numbers will be. Are we doing the right things? Because nobody knows. If the GDP goes -5, what will happen to the category growth? Nobody knows what will happen to consumers who stop socializing. Big weddings won't happen, so there won't be big, lavish bars everywhere, right? And the bars are shut, the restaurants are shut, so, and nobody knows exactly when they'll open what's going to happen, right? So the numbers will be what the numbers will be, but are we doing the right things so that when the numbers start improving, that we are in a stronger position as a company? And the role of leadership is to make sure that we, A, create positivity in a negative environment. Glass half full leadership. Okay?
Right.
Yes, deal with the problem, but then talk about the future, because there is nobody in this world who's a human being who's not inspired with a brighter future.
Right.
Okay, it's one of the tenets of leadership, right? Anybody who has an inspiring vision, people will come in and join you, say, I want to be part of this, right? Nobody wants to be part of a very dead horse. I want to jump off and go somewhere else. So your job is to create positivity, inspire people, but keep people ruthlessly focused, again, on what are those few things that's going to be critical to emerge stronger as the crisis wanes, right? And I would say that's really the load of leadership. It's not about anything very different, but it's about being even more connected with your people and having emotional engagement with your people that is even higher than it was before, all chiseled with loads of positivity and inspiration.
And especially if you were there with them during these difficult times. Yeah. And I'm going to switch. Thank you, Anand. I'm going to switch to some key questions asked by the audience. Purnima has asked a question, and I'll just read it out. It was great to hear that you have 1/3 of your leadership as women. And first of all, kudos to you for driving that diversity in your leadership. My question is, in your experience, what difference do you see in their leadership? And especially, what value proposition do you see women leaders bringing to the table? And it's right there in chat.
So listen, if I'm brutally honest, for a large part of my career, I never realized the importance of having diverse teams and having women around the table. In fact, for many years, I always had largely men around the table, right? The woman was the odd one out. And I still remember that there was a photograph of my leadership team at Cadbury that came out in a magazine at some point, and some friend or somebody accosted me and said, Anand, how could you? Because that entire photograph is only men. And I got shaken up a bit, right? And partly I would say the journey started because in multinational companies, it started becoming a movement. But as I used to lead two of us on the global leadership team of Diageo, where I sit, two of us were nominated to lead inclusion and diversity for the whole company. And I was one of those two people. And what I learned then, working with a lot of people and data, is there is now so much of evidence that diverse boards and diverse leadership teams have delivered better, profitable growth to companies. So this is not done because of necessarily just because it's only the right thing to do. It's good for business, and there's ample data. Now, what do I see personally? I think women approach problems and solutions in a way different that men do. This is wired differently. And therefore, if you want truly diverse dialogue so that you can get to the best decision finally, you need diverse points of view. And women genuinely bring in a different point of view because of different experiences. And I think by having a right mix of men and women, it's not about only women either, but if you're having the right mix, then you can make 1 + 1 = 3 in the quality of the dialogue and the quality of the decision that you finally take, right? I also think that, listen, in most countries, women are half the consumers of even our category.
Right.
So that means that you are getting men to decide what's good for a woman as well, right? So I'm not sure who's given men the right to do that either, right? So I just think that, I think it absolutely does change the texture, the tenor, and the optics of our company and our industry today. Some of my senior most women in my leadership team are the one who lead our conversation with government people and regulators. Okay, can you imagine? It is very different from a man walking into a regulator's office. When a woman walks in, and a woman who's competent. I mean, competence goes without saying, okay? But just the tenor of the conversation changes. And suddenly they start seeing our industry as quite different from the way they saw it earlier. So I think it changes the culture internally, it changes the quality of the decisions, it changes the optics. And finally, you know what? It improves the performance.
It's good for business. Thanks, Anand. So here's a question from Shyam. And the question is, especially in a crisis, a bad leader destroys the business ecosystem in order that his business survive, which eventually leads to the collapse of the business. On the other hand, a great leader who takes care of the ecosystem and follows the policy of live and let live, more often than not thrives and is respected all around. So your thoughts on this? Now, you've already talked about it, but any additional thoughts on your views?
Listen, it's very true. And, companies and businesses are meant to be going concerns. And if you really manage your business quarter to quarter, then you will end up there and you will fail, right? You have to both manage the short term and the long term, right? But you have to be clear that you will never forsake the long term for the short term. So, doing something in the short term, so I'll maximize bonus earnings this year. So why have some of the biggest institutions failed? It's because of the bait of bonus, which has forced leaders to do wrong things. And the more bonus you gave, the cost of failure became even higher, and therefore the motivation to do something wrong even higher. And there are many cases where people have forsaken the long term of an institution, actually brought institutions down to their knees because they have leveraged the short term for personal benefit, personal gain sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? Or to save themselves, from being evicted from the job sometimes. Yeah. And listen, everyone knows when you step back that was the wrong thing to do, and so do those leaders who are obviously very smart. It's just the pressure of the circumstance around you. And if you don't have the courage of conviction and the courage of character, then you give in.
Yeah.
And you set yourself and your institution up for failure. So choice making is important. And one of the very important skills I'll say in multinational companies is stakeholder management. You have to manage people above you. It's one of the biggest jobs of a leader. So that you don't just pass the pressure down and force people below you to do the wrong things. That happens ever so often, huh?
Right.
Ever so often. Then you just pass the heat on and the pressure on. And then people do the wrong things. And you say, but I never expect you to do the wrong thing. And so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Okay. So on a related note, interesting question from Sanjay Banerjee, and that is, how do you deal with leadership lethargy, which goes the other way, which is masked, hidden in terms of KRAs and KPIs and so on? The KRAs and KPIs are used to, in a way, disguise lethargy. People really not putting their best effort, but behind KRAs and KPIs. Does that make sense, the question?
Well, I suppose this is about making sure that everybody has equally stretched goals and that your goals are outcome driven and not input driven. I have seen too many goals and the way KRAs are set to be input driven, so activity driven. So at the end of the year, you will tick off and say the activity has been done. Whether the goals were stretching and whether the goals were well linked to output metrics, which is the only thing of relevance in a business, right? I think there has very often been a gap, and particularly in staff functions, right? And no disrespect to people in staff functions, but it's very easy to measure the sales guy or the production guy. It's very hard to measure the lawyer or the HR person. And therefore, you give many people those softer targets, right? Which aren't numeric and metric driven and easily measurable and not linked to an outcome. And you give the easy guys where you can have a number against your name, like the sales guy or the marketing guy or the supply guy, right? That. And I think, therefore, setting goals is an art. And I believe in the concept of goal alignment starting from the top and a rigorous process of goal alignment going across and down the company. So my goals are going to be stretching because my boss will make sure I have stretching goals. And how do I make sure that that translates and connects seamlessly with then my leadership team and then each leadership team taking it down?
Right.
That ensures in some ways that there is a linkage and everyone feels and connects with their role to the goal of the business, right? And that's very powerful in itself, by the way, right? But also then making sure that certain formulas of input metrics and output metrics are there, right? So for instance, a lawyer, I'll say we have 1,000 cases pending. I want 25% of cases to be closed this year. Last year, we closed 5%. Right. They'll say, how can we do, how the legal system works in India, Supreme Court, we can't dictate. I said, yes, but it's tough to sell in an environment where GDP is going down too, and nobody knows for sure what the sales target is. So now you get me this. And you turn the heat on, and you've got to be sensible. You don't want to set up people for failure, right? But you want to stretch them appropriately so that what you're calling organizational or management lethargy doesn't set in. And I think that's the role of the line manager at every stage of the organization to ensure it doesn't happen.
Right. Very interesting. That answers also the question from Mandeep on how do you align your own goals, your team, and the goals of the organization. I want to follow up with this question from Madhur. And then that is, when do you give up? When does a leader give up on an employee? You've done all this and the employee is not performing. How long is long enough?
Well, I mean, I don't have the precise answer, but it's true. My early career in sales, I was telling you guys about. One of these guys who was old enough to be my father, but who worked for me, told me, and in Hindi, he told me, Saab, jitna bhi training de do, aap gadhe ko ghode nahi bana sakte ho. So, finally, at some point, training is not going to change, right? Change a person. But you have to believe in your conscience that you've tried everything you can to turn around and improve a person, right? And I have been guilty, by the way, of the other extreme of trying too hard and not taking the final call on people, right? And that's come as feedback to me many times in my career, saying you're too soft. This person not delivering, and I'll say, no, let me coach him, let me help him, let him give me more input, etc., etc. And I'm not good at taking the call either sometimes, right? But I think you have to believe in your conscience that you've been sincere to that subordinate in terms of helping that person get to potential and get to the levels of the job.
Okay.
If not, and I'll tell you one thing, it is lose-lose for the person to stay, and it can be win-win if the person leaves. Because I've seen many people who you've let go have gone and prospered in their careers on a different trajectory outside, but would have failed if you had kept them here for too long and would have lost self-confidence even thereafter. So I think taking the right call constructively with the right conversation with the individual versus a firing conversation, but a constructive coaching conversation, I think can really help. And I've seen examples of that.
Okay, very interesting. A question from Lokendra, and this is to the young generation. What advice would you give the young generation who are about to pass out from their college, not pass out otherwise, but pass out from their institution, or who have 2 to 3 years in their career path and are just starting, or perhaps even startup people, basically the early stage employee? What advice would you give in terms of how to approach their career, how to approach their work?
I think first and foremost, you got to find something that you really enjoy doing. You cannot spend your career doing things you're unhappy doing. There is no model of happiness. There may be a model of success. Even that I don't think so, but there's no model of happiness. That's for sure. So first you got to really seek out what you believe will just make you feel like it's not a job, right? But it's also fun and enjoyment. And the second thing that I tell people is you have to excel in every job you're given and believe that in every job that you take on, you can leave a legacy behind. Because after you leave that job, people must remember you and say, this guy was in that job and he made the difference in that job. So you have to show the hunger and desire to make a difference and to excel. And I believe that people who focus on their current jobs and excel go further than people who are always looking at their next jobs and not focusing on the current one. Okay, they trip on the current one then. So that's the simple things I will say. Give your heart to it, right? And we all want people, we don't need Einsteins working for us, but we want people who have hunger and fire in the belly, who want to make a difference. That's not to do with, that's nothing to do with IQ.
Yeah.
That's just how you are.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody loves people. We're talking about NASA here, right? So everyone loves people who are there hungry to make a difference and want to leave an impact, right? And that's what you must do.
So in many ways, ambition gets in the way. Looking to the future, trying to be ambitious, that gets in the way of what you're doing now. Yeah.
I feel that many of the most successful people never said, I want to be CEO, but got there.
Yeah. Okay. There's a quite interesting question from Monica. And that is, empathy and profit drive equally in current situations. How have you used both in your roles? The profit motive or the performance motive as well as empathy?
Listen, I think empathy is just the character of the organization and the character of the leader, right? Profit is an outcome of what you do, finally. You don't deliver profit by chasing profit, finally. Okay? Nobody does. It's like you don't deliver a sales target by chasing the sales target. You deliver a sales target by understanding what's beneath the sales target in terms of the drivers of that sales target. All right. So I think empathy is to do. So I must say one more thing. I'm a great believer that culture drives performance rather than the other way around. Culture of an organization drives performance and delivers the outcome more than the other way around. And therefore, if you have empathy, right, obviously with the right people around you, you create a machine that will deliver whatever you want them to deliver, and provided there's a clear and focused strategy, they will deliver that, and that will deliver profit for the organization, right? If you don't have empathy and the right culture, I think the profit motive will be short-lived.
Would you say that EQ is sort of more important than IQ in that sense?
So I think it's the right balance. I don't think, you take people with no IQ at all and think that they can do a great job, but you also don't need Einsteins when you're selling alcohol or soap or shampoo or toothpaste. So I said, you need some level of intellect, but I'll tell you what happens. Most people who are smart grow very fast in their functions, but never make the transition to true leadership or business leadership. That's where the EQ accent becomes much bigger. You've already got the IQ if you've gotten there, but if you don't have the EQ, you'll stop there.
Yeah, very interesting. And some of the participants have pointed out the Ikigai lessons here, the Japanese system Ikigai, of trying to find out what really makes you come alive. That's one of the connections that people have been seeing. Let me ask a question on this. Where have you found the biggest challenges in leadership? Your own personal, where have you, in some ways thought and not come up with the right answer? Where have you struggled when it comes to leadership? Dealing with that, let me see other comments from the participants.
There are many
What's been your
places.
biggest struggle?
Many places, obviously. And listen, there's nobody in this world who's had a career without challenges and setbacks, is my belief. Okay. Everyone's had challenges and setbacks, right? I've had many too. I've had to experience the first time when somebody who had equivalent experience from me got promoted ahead of me, and how to deal with the lack of self-confidence. When I was head of sales in Unilever, over 3 years, we delivered half of what we were supposed to deliver in terms of our change agenda. And I learned the lesson hard because the performance was bad. And I learned the lesson hard that I had under-communicated, and that change doesn't happen because one time you say something and everyone will do it, right? I had to keep doing it again. And I faced a lot of challenges in my current business. I mean, walking away from business by saying that I will not do the wrong thing. And the cost of doing that, and then to be able to explain to stakeholders that, you're not, because listen, everyone has a target and a number, right? But it's about your courage of conviction to just stay the course and carry your stakeholders with you. So, I mean, there are many more, I'm sure, but there are just some top of the mind ones.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. No, that's very good. We only have another 4 minutes. So just going to quickly turn to one of the wise persons in this group. That's Sahai, Yadvendra Sahai. Sahai, let me unmute you to get your thoughts on any quick comments, Sahai, from you. We've known you now for 40 years. Go ahead, Sahai. Any thoughts or questions, Anand?
See, no questions, but only thing which I learned very well from Kripalu. I was going for a very senior position, and during the transition, I went to Anand's office in Bombay. I said, I please help me prepare for my next job. So what he told was communicate, and don't think that you are going to be under communicating. And that helped me. I was quite a inward-looking person. And it helped me quite a bit in the next job because there were a lot of challenges. So I think that was something which I learned very well from Anand. That's the only time I sort of reached out to him, and he immediately said, come for a meeting, and I'll so that's very good. That's my comment.
I remember that.
Thanks.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yes. Thank you very much. And any final questions from the audience? Let me ask, is Arun Malhotra? I saw Arun's name. Just want to make sure if he's there in the audience. Arun, are you there? Unmute yourself. I don't see him here. Okay, he was there before. But we have 2 minutes on, and it's just been just a tremendous pleasure. I've had you on these programs for the last 5 years. This has just been especially wonderful. And as many of the others have pointed out, Rao Nova and Rajiv Sabharwal and many of our other classmates, you truly exemplify, in my mind, in our minds, real leadership. You won the Distinguished Alumnus Award, among the first ones to do so from IIM Calcutta. And I think the award could not have gone to a better person. You have really shown the sense of leadership while remaining the kind of person you've been talking about, bringing energy to what you do, really being motivated, not thinking in terms of, okay, what next, and so on, but doing a great job of what you've done, leaving a legacy, especially thinking in terms of higher purpose, the moral principles. This is something you've been mentioning for many years. And I remember 5 years ago at Diageo, you were saying that that's what you really care about, making the industry itself responsible. And in the last 5 years, as a professor and as an academic, I've been tracking you. And that's the kind of change you've been bringing about in the industry, in an industry that normally is not associated with it, not associated with responsibility. You've made that a real clarion call for you. And the way you've done it, the way you've brought about transformation. As we all know, almost 70–80% of transformation efforts fail. And it's amazing, this complex transformation you brought about in a very large company and how it has succeeded is truly amazing. And that's a real life lesson. It's a great case study. It's a great lesson for everyone on how to appeal to the heart and appeal to the soul also, the soul and spirit of persons. And while being performance driven, not compromising in performance, the combination of empathy and performance, the left brain, right brain, that holistic approach to leadership, which I sort of selfishly call being full leadership, is something that you truly exemplify. And really, it's been an honor and a pleasure having you here. And I really want to thank all the others also who've been in this call, old classmates, other participants, students, for being very actively engaged in this. And I thank everyone who joined this wonderful webinar, wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Anand, and look forward to having you again another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Ramki, for inviting me, and also to so many of our IIM batchmates to sit and listen to me for an hour and a half after 40 years. But it is a pleasure to have them online as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for doing this. Okay.
Thank you.